Carla Montgomery's world shifts in an instant. She's scrolling through her usual news feed, mindlessly flipping through stories, until one headline stops her cold: local man wins $12 million lottery, leaves for new life. The photo attached to the article features a man she knows all too well, her husband, Ethan Roberts. Carla stares at the screen in disbelief, a chill crawling up her spine. That's Ethan, the same man she spent the last 15 years of her life with. She blinks twice, but the headline doesn't change. $12 million. Gone. And so was Ethan. How could it be? Ethan, the quiet mechanic who'd always been the steady rock of their little family. Ethan, the man she built a life with, raised their daughter Sophie with, and dreamed of a future together, he vanished. Without a word. Without any explanation. Carla had been blindsided. She'd searched for answers, desperately grasping at any clue that could explain why her husband, the man she thought she knew, would disappear with no warning. But now, 4 years later, this headline was all the confirmation she needed. The story was only the beginning. What came next would turn everything Carla thought she knew about her marriage, and the man she once loved, completely upside down. Thank you my viewers and my subscribers. If you are new here, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our new videos. Carla Montgomery was born in Boise, Idaho, a small but tight-knit town nestled against the Rocky Mountains. Growing up as the eldest of 3 siblings, Carla developed an independent streak early on. Her father, a carpenter, and her mother, a school teacher, instilled in her a strong work ethic and a drive to dream big. Despite their modest means, Carla's parents always emphasized the importance of education, and from a young age, Carla knew she wanted more than the life she had, more than the small town, more than the predictable path that so many of her peers seemed content to follow. Her passion for design was born during childhood, when she would spend hours drawing elaborate house plans, imagining how she would decorate the perfect home one day. The idea of creating beautiful, functional spaces fascinated her, and by the time she finished high school, Carla knew exactly what she wanted to pursue: interior design. She wasn't always the most popular girl in school, often spending more time in her sketchbook than socializing, but those who knew her saw her for what she was: ambitious, driven, and capable. She attended a local community college to study design, balancing her studies with odd jobs to make ends meet. It was during one of these jobs that she met Ethan. Ethan Roberts, a mechanic by trade, was a quiet, reserved man with a rough-around-the-edges charm that contrasted sharply with Carla's bright, outgoing demeanor. The two met through mutual friends at a house party when they were both in their late 20s. While Ethan didn't say much, there was something comforting about his presence. His calm, grounded nature provided a sense of security that Carla, despite her own ambitions, had long craved. Ethan was never one to seek attention, content to work with his hands in the small-town garage, fixing cars day in and day out. They quickly became inseparable. Ethan's solid, dependable nature complemented Carla's more spontaneous and ambitious personality. They built a life together, one filled with simple pleasures, from Sunday afternoons spent hiking in the nearby foothills to quiet nights in their small apartment. They were opposites in many ways, but their love for each other felt like a perfect balance. Carla admired Ethan's dedication to his craft, and Ethan was drawn to Carla's creativity and drive. In many ways, they seemed to complete each other. The couple married after 3 years of dating. They were a young couple in love, with big dreams of one day owning a home of their own. But despite their best efforts, life didn't always make it easy. The dream of owning a home seemed perpetually out of reach as they lived paycheck to paycheck, struggling to make ends meet. Ethan's mechanic work wasn't exactly lucrative, and Carla's freelance interior design projects brought in only a modest income. They had a daughter, Sophie, just a few years after marriage, and while their financial situation remained tight, their bond seemed to keep them afloat. As for Ethan, while he had always been the quieter one in the relationship, there was an intensity to his personality that Carla rarely saw. He didn't talk much about his past, but there were fleeting moments when Carla caught glimpses of a man who carried more than the weight of his humble life. Ethan had grown up in a broken home, raised by a single mother who struggled to make ends meet. He had learned to fend for himself at an early age, taking odd jobs and learning mechanics in order to survive. His relationship with his mother had always been strained, she was distant, and he had long since stopped expecting any kind of emotional support from her. Despite this, Ethan had never been one to harbor bitterness. He was a man of few words, but he was dependable, and he had always been a rock for Carla. That is, until the lottery win. The man Carla had built her life around, the one she thought she knew, began to change. It was that fateful Friday night, just after Ethan bought the lottery ticket on a whim, that everything started to unravel. Carla's life, already stretched thin by years of financial struggles, suddenly felt like it was teetering on the edge of something unrecognizable. The lottery ticket that had been a passing joke soon became the catalyst for Ethan's transformation. Ethan, a man who had never been interested in excess or material wealth, suddenly became obsessed with his new fortune. It wasn't just the money. Carla had seen him spend larger amounts before on tools or cars, but this was different. This was a change in him, something darker, something rooted in a desire for more than he could ever have imagined. Behind this newfound obsession was David Wright, Ethan's best friend and the man who had unknowingly set the stage for the unfolding tragedy. David, a local businessman with a sharp mind for investments, had been the one to buy the lottery ticket for Ethan. He never expected the ticket to win, and neither did Ethan. But when it did, David's initial excitement quickly turned into concern. David had known Ethan for years, and over time, he had seen a side of him that Carla hadn't, the ambitious, calculating side of Ethan that could be both charming and dangerous. David had no idea just how much this windfall would change his friend. The man he had known for years was slipping away, replaced by someone greedy and unrecognizable. David's growing concern led him to confront Ethan, but the conversation didn't go as he expected. Ethan admitted the shocking truth: he hadn't won the lottery. The ticket had been a mistake, a mix-up, but he had cashed it in and kept the money for himself. David, horrified by the truth, was left helpless. His friend had not only betrayed Carla and Sophie, but he had also betrayed their friendship, all for the allure of wealth. Boise, Idaho, was the type of town where everything felt familiar, even the smallest details. The sprawling suburbs were quiet, with rows of modest homes, the kind that spoke to a simple, comfortable life. Carla's home, nestled on a tree-lined street in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other's names, was no exception. It wasn't much, just a small, single-story house with a picket fence and a backyard where Sophie would spend hours running around in the summer. But to Carla, it was everything. It was a place filled with memories, the laughter of a young child, the quiet hum of Ethan's car engine as he worked on his latest project in the garage, the gentle conversations over dinner, dreams shared over mugs of coffee. But something had shifted in the air, something Carla couldn't quite put her finger on. In the weeks leading up to Ethan's disappearance, it wasn't just the usual strain of everyday life that was weighing on her. There was a subtle, almost imperceptible change in their household. Ethan, once a steady presence in their home, began to drift away in small ways, his quiet nature slowly becoming more withdrawn. He spent more time locked in the garage, fiddling with tools or staring blankly at his phone for hours. When he did speak, his words were shorter, his responses clipped. It wasn't unusual for him to retreat into his world of mechanics, but this was different. The distance between them wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. Carla noticed it most on the nights when they sat down for dinner. She'd catch him staring off into the distance, not quite there, even though his body was present. It wasn't like Ethan to check out mentally, especially when they had so much to discuss: the future, their plans for their daughter, their dreams of owning a home. But those conversations had started to wither. And when she tried to ask about it, Ethan would deflect or change the subject, as though he feared the questions she was asking. It wasn't until the lottery win that the signs became undeniable. Carla remembers the night he first came home with that smile, the smile that seemed so out of place on his face. It was as though a switch had been flipped in him. His eyes had a wild, almost manic gleam to them, and his usual calm demeanor seemed replaced by an energy she didn't recognize. When Ethan held up the lottery ticket, giddy with excitement, Carla laughed it off, dismissing it as another one of his impulsive whims. But something in the air was different. There was a sharpness to Ethan's excitement, a sense that the prize wasn't just about the money, it was about something more. Something Carla couldn't understand. Over the next few days, as they discussed what they'd do with the money, Carla noticed Ethan becoming more secretive, more elusive. It wasn't just that he was now speaking less, it was the way he avoided her gaze, the way he closed off any attempts at conversation about their future. Something about the air between them felt thicker, more charged. It was a tension she couldn't ignore, but at the time, she chalked it up to the uncertainty of suddenly coming into wealth. Now, looking back, Carla realized she had missed the early signs, the moments when the man she loved began to change. The lottery win had unlocked something in Ethan, something that wasn't about the money at all. It was a Friday night when Ethan's transformation fully took shape. Carla had been looking forward to a quiet evening at home, just the two of them, catching up after a hectic week. The plan had been simple: dinner, maybe a movie, and then an early night. After all, they had plenty to discuss: how they would handle the newfound wealth, what kind of future they would build for Sophie. It had felt like a momentous time in their lives, a chance to finally make the dreams they had shared for so long a reality. But as the day wore on, Carla began to feel an unease that she couldn't explain. When Ethan walked through the door that evening, it wasn't the usual tired but familiar man who greeted her. He was different, his face alight with an unfamiliar gleam, a wild energy about him that Carla hadn't seen before. His hand gripped the lottery ticket like it was the most important thing in the world, and his eyes darted between her and the slip of paper, his mouth curling into a grin that seemed both excited and, almost desperate. "Carla," he said, his voice rising with anticipation. "We've won. $12 million. It's real." At first, Carla laughed, expecting him to be joking. It was typical of Ethan, he was always full of surprises, but they both knew how rare it was for anyone to win the lottery. She teased him, playfully accusing him of wasting money on a pipe dream, as she often did when he indulged in his little whims. But then Ethan showed her the numbers on his phone. The matching digits, the overwhelming confirmation. Carla's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the screen, her mind struggling to catch up with what she was seeing. $12 million. It was beyond anything they had ever imagined. For a brief moment, everything felt perfect. Carla could see it all: the new house, the business she had always dreamed of starting, the travel they'd put off for years. Ethan, too, seemed caught in the euphoria of the win. He was talking a mile a minute, discussing plans for their new life, the things they would buy, the freedom they would finally have. But beneath the excitement, something shifted, something Carla couldn't quite place. It was in the way Ethan was talking, his words coming fast and jumbled, as if the money wasn't just a blessing, it was a beacon, pulling him in a direction Carla couldn't follow. As the evening wore on, Ethan's behavior grew stranger. The quiet man she had married, who had always been thoughtful and reserved, seemed almost manic. He was pacing around the house, making phone calls, speaking in low tones that Carla couldn't quite catch. He avoided her eyes, never sitting still for too long, constantly checking his phone, his face tight with an intensity she had never seen before. It wasn't the joy of a man who had just come into a fortune, it was the feverish need of someone who was slipping into something darker. Carla tried to ask him about it, about the plans he was making, the sudden secrecy, the way he was withdrawing from her. She approached him gently, hoping to keep the peace, but the moment she asked, Ethan's face hardened. He turned away, muttering under his breath. "I just need some space, Carla. This is a lot to take in." The words hit her like a slap in the face. This wasn't like Ethan. He was always the steady one, the reliable one. They had built a life together based on mutual understanding and shared dreams. But now, it felt as if those dreams were crumbling before her eyes. "I don't understand," she said, her voice tight with confusion. "We're supposed to be in this together, Ethan. You don't need to hide things from me." He didn't respond. Instead, he grabbed his coat and moved toward the door. "Where are you going?" Carla asked, her heart sinking. "I need to clear my head," he said quickly, avoiding her gaze. "I'll be back later. Just, give me some time." The door slammed behind him, leaving Carla standing alone in the kitchen, her thoughts racing. The excitement from earlier had evaporated, replaced by a cold fear she couldn't shake. What had just happened? What was Ethan hiding? She waited for hours, staring at the clock, each passing minute dragging her further into a pit of anxiety. She tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She sent texts, each one more desperate than the last, but still, no response. By the time the morning sun began to break through the blinds, Carla had heard nothing from Ethan. Her stomach churned, and her thoughts spiraled. Could it be that he had just gone to clear his head, as he had said? Or was something more insidious at play? It wasn't until later that afternoon when the doorbell rang, hours after Carla had given up all hope of hearing from him, that she saw him. Ethan stood on the front porch, his face cold, his eyes distant. "I'm leaving," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Carla's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean, you're leaving? Where are you going?" Ethan simply shook his head. "I need space, Carla. I need to figure things out. But we've been through so much together," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "What's happening? What's going on?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty silence that followed. It was in that moment, the quiet, finality of it all, that Carla realized, the man she loved, the man she had built a life with, was gone. And nothing, not even the lottery win, could bring him back. The days following Ethan's departure were a blur of unanswered questions and growing dread. Carla couldn't believe that he had just left, no explanation, no goodbye, nothing. As the initial shock wore off, the cold reality set in, Ethan was gone, and she had no idea where to begin searching for him. His absence was like a weight pressing down on her chest, suffocating her every breath. She knew something wasn't right, but the why, the how, and the where of it all eluded her. She tried to stay calm, to be rational. Ethan had left before, briefly, always coming back, always explaining himself in time. But this time, it felt different. This time, he hadn't even given her a chance to fight for him, to beg him to come back. The feeling of betrayal cut deeper than any argument could have. Still, Carla needed answers. She couldn't just sit back and accept his silence. The first thing she did was contact the police. At first, they were dismissive. Ethan was an adult, and although his disappearance was unusual, there was no immediate evidence of foul play. "Give it a little time," the officer had said, barely glancing up from his paperwork. "People leave all the time, especially after something big happens, like winning the lottery. He'll be back." But Carla couldn't just wait. She called in a private investigator, a man named Jack Donnelly, who had worked several missing person cases in the area. Jack was thorough, methodical, and most importantly, he didn't treat her like she was overreacting. From the moment he walked into her house, his presence gave Carla a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in days. Jack started by going through Ethan's phone records, searching for any clues that might lead them to his whereabouts. At first, there was nothing, no odd behavior, no cryptic messages, nothing out of the ordinary. The phone was just as silent as Ethan had been since he walked out the door. But then a small detail caught Jack's eye, a number that kept coming up, a local phone number that Ethan had called several times in the days before he disappeared. The number belonged to David Wright, the businessman who had unknowingly handed Ethan the winning lottery ticket. Carla's stomach sank as Jack made the connection. She had met David once, years ago, at a barbecue Ethan had thrown for his work friends. He had seemed friendly enough, but she hadn't given him much thought since. Now, in light of Ethan's sudden disappearance, David's role in the whole situation seemed more than just coincidental. Jack reached out to David, but when he spoke to him on the phone, David was evasive, reluctant to provide any real answers. He claimed that he hadn't seen or spoken to Ethan in the days leading up to his disappearance, but his tone didn't match his words. There was something off about the way he responded, as if he were hiding something. Jack, sensing this, pressed him further, but David remained tight-lipped. That was when Jack suggested they dig deeper into Ethan's recent spending habits. They subpoenaed Ethan's bank records, hoping to find any signs of financial instability, large withdrawals, or purchases that could give them a clue about where he might have gone or what he was planning. The records told a troubling story. Ethan had withdrawn a substantial amount of cash in the days before he vanished, money that hadn't been spent on anything obvious. No luxury cars, no extravagant vacations. Just cash, sitting in an account, waiting to be used for something unknown. The next clue came from a surprising source, Ethan's garage. Jack had a hunch, so they decided to visit the one place that had been a consistent part of Ethan's life, the small garage where he worked on cars, the place where he felt most at home. When they opened the door, Carla felt a strange chill. The garage was empty, too empty. There were no tools out of place, no unfinished projects. But there was something else, a small, locked box on the workbench that Carla had never seen before. It wasn't large, maybe the size of a shoebox, and it was secured with a simple padlock. Carla couldn't help herself. She picked it up and handed it to Jack. Inside, they found a stack of cash, more than Carla had ever seen in their entire life, and a notebook filled with cryptic entries. The writing wasn't Ethan's. It looked like someone else had been keeping track of his movements, writing down strange notes about meetings, locations, and plans for the money. Some of the entries were unclear, but one stood out to Carla: David wants to move fast, can't wait too long. A feeling of dread began to settle in. Ethan's disappearance was no longer a random act of escape, it was part of something much larger, something that Carla wasn't prepared for. She had trusted Ethan completely, and now, all she had were these pieces, fragments of a man she no longer recognized. Still, Jack's investigation wasn't without its dead ends. David had no criminal record, and no one seemed to know where Ethan had gone, except for the cryptic phone calls and suspicious activity in the days before his disappearance. There were no signs of violence, no indication that Ethan had been in danger. And yet, it all felt wrong. Meanwhile, Carla's personal search grew more desperate. Every night, she combed the internet, hoping for any update, any hint of where Ethan might be. The days turned into weeks, and each time she heard a rumor or saw a possible sighting, her heart would race. She would call the number, only to find that it was either a dead end or a mistake. The frustration began to wear on her. The hope that Ethan might return soon started to feel like a cruel joke. Was he out there, living a new life, or was something far worse at play? The more Carla dug, the more she began to question everything. What was Ethan involved in? What did David know that he wasn't sharing? And, most importantly, was Ethan still alive? For weeks, Carla's life had been consumed by the search for Ethan. Every lead, every hint, every small clue had brought her to dead ends or false hope. The police had all but given up, chalking Ethan's disappearance up to a midlife crisis or some kind of selfish escape. Even Jack, the private investigator she had trusted, was starting to run out of ideas. The cryptic messages in the notebook, the suspicious withdrawals of cash, the phone calls to David, they all pointed to a man consumed by greed, but where was Ethan now? Was he really living the life of luxury he had fantasized about, or had something gone horribly wrong? Then came the breakthrough, an unexpected twist that no one had anticipated. It was a Thursday afternoon when Jack called Carla with the news. His voice, usually steady and calm, was tight with urgency. "Carla, I need you to meet me. There's something you need to see." Carla's heart skipped a beat. She had become numb to the constant churn of false alarms, But Jack's tone was different. This time, there was something significant. She rushed to the office where Jack had been piecing together the investigation, her thoughts spinning. Was Ethan found? Had they traced him to a new location? When Carla arrived, she was met with the sight of Jack holding a stack of printouts, his expression somber. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. I've been going through Ethan's phone records again, there was something I missed earlier. We've been so focused on his connection to David, we overlooked another person. The name Jack dropped hit Carla like a punch to the gut. Ethan had been in contact with someone else, someone we haven't even considered. Her breath caught. Who? His ex-wife, Jack said, sliding a printout across the desk. Carla's fingers trembled as she looked at the page. The name was unfamiliar, Stacy Roberts. Ethan's first wife, the woman he had been married to before Carla. The very thought of another woman in his life sent a wave of icy dread through Carla's veins. Ethan had never once mentioned her to Carla, not even in passing. Her phone number's been showing up on Ethan's records for weeks, Jack continued. And there's more, Stacy's been making large withdrawals too, matching the timing of Ethan's cash pulls. It looks like they've been in contact the entire time. I think she knows something. The revelation hit Carla hard. Ethan had never even mentioned Stacy after they married, she had assumed his previous relationship was long buried, something he'd put behind him. Now, she was learning that Ethan's connection to his past wife hadn't been severed, as she had believed. Had Ethan really left for greed, or was there more to the story than the sudden rush for money? Was Stacy involved in this new life Ethan was building? Carla felt a sickening sense of betrayal. If Ethan was still in contact with his ex-wife, if they had been conspiring together behind her back, what kind of man was she married to? What had happened to the Ethan who had once pledged to build a life with her? Jack didn't hesitate. I think we need to find Stacy. This could be the missing link, Carla. If she knows where he is, or if they've been hiding something, this might lead us to the truth. The two of them wasted no time tracking down Stacy. With a few calls and some investigative legwork, they were able to locate her in a nearby town, living in a modest apartment, nowhere near the lifestyle she might have expected given Ethan's lottery win. It didn't make sense. If she was part of the plan, why was she living so quietly? When they confronted her, the truth came out in fragments, each piece more shocking than the last. Stacy admitted that she had been in contact with Ethan in the weeks leading up to his disappearance, but her involvement was not what Carla had feared. In fact, Stacy revealed that Ethan had been the one to cut her off, not the other way around. He didn't want me to know, Stacy confessed, her voice trembling with guilt. He didn't want anyone to know the truth. The lottery ticket, it was a mistake. It wasn't his to begin with. David gave it to him, thinking he could use it to change his life, but Ethan kept the money for himself. He didn't care about the lottery. He didn't care about me, or about you, Carla. He wanted more than money. He wanted a new identity, a new life. The revelation rocked Carla to the core. Ethan hadn't just left her for the lottery, he had left because he was consumed by the need to escape. His past, his old relationships, his old life, it was all too much for him to bear. The lottery win had been a symbol, a ticket out of the life he had never been able to outrun. Stacy's confession not only explained Ethan's strange behavior but also uncovered a deeper layer to the mystery. He had been running from something, or someone, long before the money entered the picture. He hadn't abandoned Carla for greed alone. He had been running from the very person he had been, a man trapped in his own guilt and insecurities, unable to face the consequences of his actions. In the end, the twist was not just about money. It was about a man desperate to reinvent himself at any cost, even if it meant abandoning the family he had once promised to love forever. The truth about Ethan's disappearance left Carla shattered, her emotions in turmoil. For months, she had been searching for answers, driven by the hope that Ethan's absence was a mistake, that there was some reason behind his sudden departure that she could understand, some explanation that could restore the man she once knew. But the truth, that Ethan had been running, not just from her but from his own past, left her feeling as though the ground had been pulled out from under her. His betrayal was profound, not just because he had left her without a word, but because he had never trusted her enough to share his fears, his insecurities, or his reasons for wanting to escape. The man she had loved had hidden himself behind the facade of a lottery win, a simple ticket that promised everything but delivered nothing. The promise of wealth had ultimately corrupted Ethan, but not in the way Carla had initially thought. It wasn't just the money, it was his inability to confront his past and his need to reinvent himself, to bury everything he had once known and loved in a bid to escape the weight of his own guilt. Now, as Carla sat alone in their home, her daughter Sophie playing quietly in the corner, she found herself asking the same questions again and again. How could she have been so blind? Had Ethan really been this lost all along, or was it the lure of the lottery that finally broke him? She didn't know. The answers, like everything else in the mess of her life, were elusive. The emotional fallout was far more complicated than Carla had ever expected. There was no clear closure, no perfect ending that would allow her to move on without looking back. Ethan had left her with questions that would never be fully answered, and the weight of the years they had spent together, years she thought were built on love and trust, now seemed like a lie. In the months that followed, Carla focused on rebuilding her life, on finding stability and peace in a world that had been rocked by betrayal. She continued her work as an interior designer, building a small but growing business. She took solace in Sophie, who was growing up fast, and who, despite the absence of her father, had never faltered in her ability to love and trust those around her. The emotional toll was undeniable. Carla had learned to trust her instincts again, to recognize when something felt off, even when it was easier to ignore. But the loss of her marriage, the loss of the man she had once loved, remained a scar that would never fully heal. Ethan's fate was now a distant echo, a tragic story of a man consumed by his own desire for escape, leaving behind nothing but wreckage. In the end, Carla found herself asking what could have been different. But even as the questions lingered, she understood that there were no answers waiting to be found. Ethan's life had been one of choices, and those choices had led him down a path where no one, least of all Carla, could follow. As she sat in silence, reflecting on the man Ethan had been and the man he had become, Carla made a choice. To let go of the past. To move forward, not as the woman who had been left behind, but as the woman who had survived it all. And in the quiet of her home, with Sophie by her side, Carla realized that healing was not about finding closure, it was about learning to live again, on her own terms. Thank you for watching today's story. We hope it gave you some insight into the dark side of ambition and the unexpected consequences of choices made in pursuit of wealth. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us and helps bring these stories to more people who need to hear them. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we dive into another shocking true crime mystery. What happens when a seemingly perfect life unravels in the blink of an eye? We'll explore that and more in our upcoming content. You won't want to miss it, so hit that notification bell to stay updated. Until next time, stay safe, and remember, things are not always as they seem.